One.
Hello, Revere, and welcome to another great show. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Greg Henning.
Thanks for having me, Morris.
It's a pleasure to have you, sir, and you are running for the district attorney for Suffolk County.
That's right. The district attorney now is not going to run for re-election, so I'm running for the seat.
Right. So could you tell us a little about yourself before we
Sure.
get into the questions?
Absolutely. I was born in Boston and raised in Suffolk County for my entire life. I'm in the district attorney's office now. I've done about 10 years as an assistant district attorney. I did the first 5 years as a prosecutor downtown in Boston, and then I ran something called the Gun Prosecution Task Force. And then after 5 years, I decided to quit my job and I became a teacher. I taught 8th graders and 12th graders at a high school in Hyde Park in Boston. And then I returned to the district attorney's office and I've been there another 5 years. For the past 5 years, I've been focusing on murder cases, and I've been the supervisor of the gang unit. So that's been my job for the past 5 years.
What are some of the, can you just tell us a little about, without mentioning names, what are some of the murder cases that you...
Sure. One of the first murder cases I worked on was a shooting where a 16-year-old boy was killed. 2 individuals from a rival gang in Dorchester stalked the young man as he was walking up the street with a friend. One person was the spotter. He watched what was going on and signaled somebody else that had a weapon, and then the shooter ended up using a bicycle and went up and shot the 2 young men. One of them died. So early on when I was doing homicide cases, I was dealing with the interaction between gangs and violence on the street, but also young people that were unfortunately involved in violent crimes, where many people in our community in Suffolk County, Revere and Boston and Chelsea have been victims of crime, and trying to make sure that people that are involved in using weapons and guns and shooting on the street are taken off the street to make sure we're all safer.
That's good. Would I be correct in saying that you are a prosecuting attorney?
That's right. So my job is I'm an assistant district attorney. I'm the chief of the gang unit, but I'm a prosecutor. That's right.
Okay, that's good to know. I have a couple of questions that were given to me, if I may.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, before we go into these, could you tell us a little about your education, what schools you went to when you graduated?
Certainly. My parents raised me downtown in Boston, and I went to Harvard for college. You probably used to watch local news back when everyone was focused on it. My dad was a television reporter for local news. John Henning, do you remember him?
Oh, of course, CBS Channel 4.
Yeah, he actually did, back in the day, he was on Channel 2, 7, 5, 7, and 4.
We loved him. We always watched him.
Thank you, yeah.
And he was a great sports, and not sports, it's a newscaster.
Yeah, he covered mostly local news and then politics internationally and nationally. And for the last 8 or 10 years of his career, he was what they call senior correspondent. And he used to say that just meant that he was an old television reporter. So he was a reporter in Boston. As I was growing up, I went to Harvard for college. And then after I left Harvard, I went to the University of Virginia for law school. And after working for a federal judge for a year, I returned to Boston and started my career as a prosecutor.
Very good, very good. Now, Mr. Henning, I would like to ask you a couple of...
You got to say Greg. I don't get to call myself Mr. Henning.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Okay. What will you do as the next DA to stem the tide of gun violence in Suffolk County? Because there's plenty of gun violence. You see it every day in the news.
There is. And unfortunately, Suffolk County is an area that has been affected by gun violence, and gun violence continues to be an issue in Suffolk County. One of the things I've been talking about in the campaign is that the district attorney is the primary law enforcement officer for the whole county. So that's all of Boston plus Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop. And I have a vision for creating what's called an unsolved shooting team to try to focus prosecutors and law enforcement officers on targeting the individuals that are using guns on the street. Because, Morris, when we were doing research on this back in 2016 and 2017, we found in particular in Boston that there were a high number of cases of shootings where individuals were not prosecuted because there aren't enough resources to put into finding the people that are using guns on the street. And this applies to Revere and to Chelsea as well. So taking prosecutor resources and using some of the top, most experienced prosecutors to target individuals that are using guns on the street and then work to take them off the street so that the community is safe. That's one of the goals I have if I become district attorney. And frankly, it's what I've been focusing a lot of my work on as a prosecutor already. Since I've been running the gang unit, one of the things I focus on are shootings that happen in Revere and in Boston and Chelsea to make sure that anybody that's brazen enough to use a gun on the street gets taken off the street to make the community safer.
Right. Just one thing I'd like to ask you, and this only happened a few days ago.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman in East Boston who was working with his computer. He claims the computer blew up, but
Yeah.
they found other things in there.
Yeah.
So when they go in to check for the computer, let's
Yeah.
say, and they find other things that had nothing to do with the case, can they do something about that?
Yeah, and what you're talking about, I think, is the police investigated the explosion, and
Right.
then when they went in to investigate the damage and the injuries, they found some ammunition and some weapons in the house.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a typical case where the prosecutor's office and the local police department can work to find evidence of what's going on inside the house. It's what I worked on as a prosecutor, and I believe in this case, I haven't been involved in this particular one, but I believe that the police did what's called a search warrant.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, yeah.
If you have a search warrant, let's say to go in to look for a gun, let's say I shot someone.
Yep.
They want a search warrant, come in the house to find the gun, but they find bomb-making equipment. Can
Yep.
they can go into that too?
What typically happens in those cases is that the search warrant is designed to aim for and search for a particular type of criminal activity or evidence of a particular crime. If the police go in and they find something that is obviously illegal, for
Right.
instance, if they found drugs inside of the house, if they found other weapons inside the house, they can seize those things that are obviously illegal. In other cases, what the police do is they call somebody like me or colleagues that I work with, and they get an extra search warrant to go in and find the other materials that they might be finding during the first search. For example, you said if they find bomb-making material.
Right.
The police can seize that if it's obviously illegal and if it's material connected to what they're searching for, or they can stop, get another search warrant, and go back and collect that information.
So in other words, if they go and look for the gun, which they got a warrant for, and they
Yeah.
see the bomb, they got to go back and get a search warrant for that too?
No, not always. For example, if you went into the house and you found a grenade, which is obviously illegal,
Right.
you would be able to seize that grenade.
Okay.
It would depend on the facts of the case, but in this situation, from what I understand, just from reading the paper, what ended up happening is the police went in and they saw guns
Right.
and ammunition. And those things are obviously illegal if the person doesn't have a license for it, and that's typically what the police would do. If it's obviously illegal, they would seize it.
Right, especially with all the terrorism we got now.
It's a big concern for everybody, and I'm glad that the police were on top of it so early.
Okay. Another question.
Next question, yep.
What? Can't read that second word. What? Blind, do you have both inside and outside the courtroom that justifies you for the position?
Are you asking
What
about...
experience?
Okay, my
I'm
experience?
sorry, I couldn't read that.
Well, from my background, I've been a prosecutor for 10 years. I've
Right.
been a lawyer for 13 years. And the trajectory, the kind of path of my career was, I started as an assistant district attorney, and during the first 5 years I was a prosecutor, I was also for a period of the time working at an after-school program in Dorchester. And I was a basketball coach and a mentor, and I ended up coaching a young man that I had prosecuted. So I started working with youth in my community and also other parts of the city of Boston and Revere and Chelsea to try to find ways to get young men to not enter the criminal justice system in the first place. And it actually got to me so much that I decided to quit my job and I became a teacher, as I mentioned before.
Right.
So I've had experience in the courtroom prosecuting criminal cases, but also in the community trying to divert and prevent people from ever getting wrapped up in the criminal justice system. Then I went and taught, and teaching in a classroom is a whole different experience. I had 3 classes of 30 students, teaching them 8th grade writing, and that's a difficult job. I had tremendous amount of respect for teachers before, but having done the job now, I have even more respect for anybody that teaches in the classroom. And then I went back to the DA's office and I've been supervising units. So I've had supervisory experience in the courtroom and also in our office. I've run grand jury investigations. I've done the most serious types of cases that you can imagine, murder cases, shootings, gang violence. But then also I've spent the last 8 or 9 years of my career working with people to make sure they don't come into the criminal justice system. In some cases, visiting and working with people that have been convicted and incarcerated, because it's important that we know when they hit the street that they're not going to become a continuing problem for the community. We need to work with them in order to make sure that they're productive citizens. So that's what I've been doing for the past 13 years.
Right, now you talked about you being a teacher in education, so here's a question that came off the computer.
Yeah.
You also have increased access to education. Can you be more specific on that?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important for us to do as prosecutors is to make sure that people know that we care about them being successful and that we don't want to simply lock people up. What our job is as prosecutors is to make the community safe. And in some cases that means finding the most violent offenders and taking them off the street. In other cases though, for some of the young men that I've worked with, it involves getting them into job training programs. In some cases I've helped individuals with preparation for things like the police exam and the sheriff's department exam, because I know how much a career and a job and employment can have an impact on them and their family down the line. So I've helped people for the past 8 or 9 years with job applications, college applications, financial aid, getting them into job training programs, GED programs, and in some cases working with guys that are in custody, sending them books and doing reading with them to get them interested again in continuing their education.
I'd like to ask you this question because we didn't go over this here.
Yeah.
If a person comes in here, let's say, forget whether he's legal or illegal,
Yep.
but let's say he comes from another country,
Yep.
he's not a citizen but commits a crime,
Yeah.
a violent crime.
Yep.
Is he sent back or is he put in jail here?
What we do in Suffolk County, and this is the
That's what
office
I
that I'm
meant.
running for, we focus on crimes that happen in our community, and in particular we focus on violent crimes. So if a person's prosecuted for a violent crime,
He's not a citizen, let's say, of the United
Right,
States, but
right.
he came in here either illegally or legally.
right, in that case the person would be prosecuted by us in the district attorney's office to answer for, to be held accountable for the crime that they commit in our community, because that's our focus. We want to make you and your colleagues and your friends and the people that you live with safe.
Right.
So we prosecute people who commit crimes regardless of where they come from. The federal government is in charge of immigration policy. So if the federal government does something like what you're talking about, sending them away, deportation,
Right.
that's something that the federal government is responsible for.
That has nothing to do with the local DA.
Correct. We prosecute crimes that happen in our community.
Okay. Here's one that'll really get you. How many support divisions are in the DA office?
I've never actually counted them all up, but I can go through some of them to explain. So we have 270 employees. Of those 270 employees, 150 of them are prosecutors. They're attorneys, and they work in a bunch of different divisions. So some of the things that you and I have talked about before, there's an entire unit called the Elders and Persons with Disability Unit, and they focus on crimes against people who are elderly, many people who are veterans like yourself, people who have retired, people who have been taken advantage of in scams or in fraudulent activity where people want to take money from elderly citizens that may not have the advantage of somebody to give them financial advice. There's a whole unit dedicated to that. There's also separate units that focus on narcotics trafficking, bringing drugs into the community, gang violence. There's a unit that just handles appeals, so cases where we have to go and argue in front of the appeals court or the SJC. There's a unit that's dedicated to child sex abuse and domestic violence cases. So there's a bunch of different units that focus on particular types of crime, and it just depends on what investigation we're running. If it's a crime of violence, it could go into one of several units.
I have a question for you. As
Yeah.
a senior citizen.
Yep, wait, Morris, you're a senior citizen?
Oh, yeah. I've
Really?
been one for a long time.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, what is considered by the DA's office
Yeah.
a senior citizen? From what age on up, let's say?
There's certain statutes, certain laws that the legislature has decided involve people who are either disabled or senior citizens. Typically it's 65.
Right.
So a person who's over the age of 65, there are certain crimes where you actually get penalized and put into jail for a longer period of time if you commit a crime against a person that's over 65. There's other cases where a person might be considered disabled even if they're under 65. So if a person is attacked or if they're taken advantage of based on their disability, that can be charged in a different type of crime because of the disability.
Oh, so a 20-year-old who's disabled can be charged, if someone commits a crime against a 20-year,
Yeah.
can be charged the same as one who commits a crime against a 60.
It's not the same law, but it's
But
the same
same.
in the sense that it's a higher punishment. Yeah, because it's important that people don't get victimized and are not made victims of crime just because of their age or just because of a disability, and the law reflects that in the way that it charges people with certain crimes.
Because I see on the news a lot of disability people that get robbed, mugged, and, you know, it's hard.
Yeah, there's specific crimes called assault and battery with a dangerous weapon on a disabled person, and that doesn't have to do with age, it has to do with whether or not they're disabled.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if people want to contact you, Mike,
Sure.
I mean, Greg,
Yeah.
excuse me, if people want to contact you, can they get a hold of you on a phone number or
Yeah.
an email? Would you tell us what it is?
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of numbers. So the
Please.
first is the district attorney's office. I'm a member of the DA's office. I've been a prosecutor there for a while, and I'm still an employee there. If somebody wants to call the district attorney's office to report something or to ask a question, The phone number is 617-619-4000. All right, so that's the DA's office, 617-619-4000. The campaign that I'm running for district attorney has a website, and I'm happy to give that to people as well. It's an easy one to remember, Morris. It's just greghenning.com.
That's it?
greghenning.com. It's an easy one to find.
And you're at 1 Bullfinch?
The district attorney's office is at 1 Bullfinch Place, which is right downtown next to Government Center in Boston. And then our campaign office, we have a few of them. One of them is in Dorchester, in Fields Corner. There's another one that's in West Roxbury, and we're opening up an office right nearby here north of the tunnel.
Right. Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
I hope you can answer this one.
Yeah.
Almost everyone today has to have a computer. I mean, you're lost if you don't have one.
I got no computer in front of me, Morris.
Not right now, but I bet you have a lot at the office.
I do. We have lots at the office.
How can you tell you're being spammed on these things? Is there a way that you can...
My aunt is the person that I would think of with this because she's younger than you, but she's been working with the computer probably the same amount of time. So my aunt will often call me and say, I got this email from a person who is asking for money in a foreign country. Or this person says that they're locked up in a jail in some foreign country in Europe and they just need me to send a little bit of money. I would basically make this rule for anybody that's getting emails or things that they think are spam. Unless you know the person who's sending you the email directly, you've met them, you know their name, you know where they live, they're a friend of yours, you should treat it as something that's suspicious. So you can always report it to people. If it's a specific type of spam, most of the emails on the bottom will say, if you're not familiar with this organization, you can unsubscribe. If it's a person whose email address you don't have, just don't reply to it.
I have to tell you a story that actually happened to me.
Yeah?
I got a thing from the IRS that I owe them a bunch of money.
Is this a phone call you got on your phone?
No.
You got an email?
No.
Because I think I got this phone call the other day.
Nope, but this came from Bellingham, Washington.
Okay.
So I said to myself, what the heck would the FBI want to call me from Bellingham when they got one office right in Boston?
Yep.
So I called them up, and they told me that that was a scam call.
You got the same call that I did. So the phone call I got was to my cell phone, my personal cell phone.
I got it to my landline.
To your landline, because that's probably the number that people know you from. I got a voicemail from, it sounded like a computer, telling me that I owed money and that if I didn't pay the money, they would come and arrest me.
Right.
And I'm running for district attorney. So I got this voicemail and I listened to it and I thought, what is this? But I've heard about these before because it's a scam that a lot of people are victim of, particularly people who are older than 65. They get this voicemail, they get an email or a message that says you owe money. The IRS doesn't leave a voicemail. That's not how it works. So same thing that you did. You call somebody up and you say, I got this message, what does it mean? Anybody who gets that should call their local police department and find out what's going on.
I'm glad you mentioned that because every spam call that I get now, I notify the Revere Police.
Yep.
And I've gotten one, but lucky, my wife was a smart woman, so she got us a block phone, landline that you can block the call.
Right, right.
And as soon as I hear the stuff like they're collecting money or they want to come in your house, especially when they want to come in your house, we block them, and that's it.
And if somebody ever schedules an appointment to come to your house, you can make sure to get the number for the organization that's going to come to the house, call to confirm. So for example, if somebody calls and says they need to check your phone line or their electric line.
We had that.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
And let me tell you what happened on that case. The guy claimed he was from the gas company.
Right.
Showed us a badge.
Yep.
A badge. It said gas company, perfectly legal. I looked outside my door and I says, where's your truck?
Yep.
He says, oh, it's parked around the corner. I says, does it have a label on it, you know, so I can see what it is, because I was getting conflicted.
You're a smart man, Morris. Trust your instincts.
So I said to him, can you bring the truck around here? And he said, sure. He went to get the truck, but the problem was I never saw him again.
Disappeared. Disappeared.
Right, just like magic.
You can, anytime you get one of those calls where a person says they need to check something, call the company directly. And you can find on your handy gadget in front of you, the computer, you can find what the company main line is and just call and say, I want to confirm that somebody is coming for this appointment. Trust your instincts, just like you did, Morris.
Okay, I got a couple of more questions
Sure,
I got off
sure.
Google. Thank you, Google. Can the DA help the victim of a violent crime? In other words, if a person is like, for example, attacked
Yes.
or robbed,
Yeah.
can they go to you?
Yes. So the first thing I would say is anytime a person becomes a victim of a crime, they should call police first. 911.
They're local
That's
police.
easy. Yep, the local police, and we work with Revere Police all the time. Revere Police will be the first people that respond when you're a victim of a crime, when you need to report a crime. So always dial 911 first. When that happens, the police will respond. But then as the case progresses, we have people in the office that work with victims of crime. They're called victim witness advocates, and they work for the county just like I do. They're in our office, and they actually will work with victims of crime to help talk to them about what happens in the court process if there is a court case. There's also a victim compensation fund. If people are victims of crime, they can apply to the state and be compensated in some small amounts for what happened, what they lost as part of being a victim of a crime. In some cases, it's a person who loses time at work and they need to pay their hospital bills, but they weren't working because they were a victim. You can apply to the Victim Compensation Fund for that. The people in our office, the victim witness advocates, they can help you with that. And they can actually work with people by just giving us a call, 617-619-4000.
And that's called the Victim Compensation Fund?
The Victim Compensation Fund is run from the state, and that's different from the DA's office. So let me explain what would happen. If the crime happens, again, 911 is the first person you call. After that, if there's a criminal case or if there's a question about how to work through the process, you can call us, 617-619-4000. But you can also look on your computer or call the Secretary of State or the Attorney General's office, and there's something called the Victim Compensation Fund. You can apply to it. You fill out some paperwork, and that documentation will go to them, and they can decide whether or not to give you some compensation for what you lost.
The thing that bothers me, for example, you see a lot of hit-and-run drivers.
Yeah.
That you see them all the time, right?
Yep.
Let's say, God forbid, you got hit by a hit-and-run and you were crippled and you
Yep.
couldn't work, and you get built up a load of bills in the hospital.
Yep.
And you can't pay them. I mean, you got to pay them, but you
Yep.
don't have the money.
Yep.
Why are you, I mean, you are responsible for those bills, but what can you do?
There's a couple things a person can do if they're a victim of being hit and run. One of them is for physical injuries, you should always make sure to report it to the police. Even if the person takes off, always call the police to report that you were hit or that your car was hit, because the record that the police will create of you being hit is important for insurance purposes. And this is kind of outside the scope of what we do in the DA's office, but I went to law school, my brothers worked in insurance law. The number one thing you're going to do is to work with the insurance companies, including your own, to try to get compensation and reimbursement for that. The DA's office can and does investigate cases of hit and run. We've had a bunch of cases where a person gets hit by a car and there's video of the car taking off, or there's a witness that describes it. That's evidence that a crime took place, and then a person could apply to the Victim Compensation Fund to get reimbursed for some of that injury, the damage.
Right. Greg, I'd like to ask you another question.
Absolutely.
Off the record, but
Off the record, are we going to turn the TVs
no,
on?
when I say off the record, I mean off the questions
Sure,
that came
sure.
off the computer.
Yeah,
What do you, if you're elected DA,
yeah.
what things are you going to do for the people in the DA's office?
Yeah. The district attorney's office, the number one priority we have is to keep you and the people that live with you and your community safe. So our primary responsibility is public safety. And the way that we do that is to work with law enforcement agencies and victims and witnesses of crimes to ensure that any crime that happens against anybody, whether they're a senior citizen, a non-resident, a child, whoever it is, we want to investigate it, prosecute it if necessary, and then make sure that the people that are committing those crimes are held responsible. So that's our primary job. That's why I get into this work, because working for victims and making your community safe, that's what I want to do as district attorney. The second thing is there are some specific things that we're focused on because it's what's facing everyone in the community. The first is gun violence, and the second is the opioid addiction and drug addiction problems and all the things that come with it. So working on gun violence is something I mentioned before, trying to make sure we use our resources to find and identify those people that are committing acts of violence in our community. But then the second is for anybody involved in addictive behavior or the opioid problem that we're facing, making sure we get those people into treatment rather than incarcerating them just because they're addicted to drugs. And it affects everybody. I have close friends of mine who have been victims and addicts before for various types of drugs, and seeing them go through withdrawal and going through the process of withdrawal in custody is not a pretty sight. We want to make sure we work with the legislature and local law enforcement and community groups so that we get people that are addicted to illegal narcotics into treatment instead of having to prosecute them for crimes, because our system is designed to work on keeping the community safe, and people who are facing addictive behavior need to get treatment in order to get better.
Good. We have about 3.5 minutes left, but I never did ask you this question. Tell
Yeah.
us a little about your family, if I may.
So my mother raised me and my brother as a homemaker. She is originally from Newton, and she met my dad when they were both in Boston University. My dad was a television reporter in training. He was going through something called the communications school. My dad was originally from Brooklyn. He was born there, and then he actually lived in Queens, which is where I think you were born in Brooklyn too, right?
Right.
Yeah. So he was a Dodgers fan, like yourself, growing up.
My wife was born in Queens. by
Really?
the way. Yep.
My dad was
Jamaica
at,
Plain in Queens.
he was near there. I memorized the address from when we were younger. He was at 8252 211th Street in Queens. So that's where he was raised. And then he was a Dodgers fan growing up his whole life until they moved. When the
Right.
Dodgers left, he became a Red Sox fan because he moved to Boston. He's not a Yankees fan like yourself. I hope I'm not outing you to the rest of the people watching.
I wish you didn't say that. But,
So he moved to Boston, and he raised me and my brother along with my mom. He was a hardworking guy. He was a great father, a great role model for me. My mother spent her time, and her career really was dedicated to raising me and my brother. So I have a nephew and 2 nieces from my brother. He lives up in Winchester. I live with my girlfriend. She's a school teacher as well. And I'm looking forward to talking to people in the campaign over the next, say, 55 or 56 days about what I want to do for Suffolk County and why I'd be the best person for the job.
what I'd like you to do when you get a chance,
Sure.
I'm from the Revere Senior Center.
Yeah.
I'm just a volunteer.
Yep.
Call up the Mr. Fielding, who
Yep.
happens to be the director. I don't
Yep.
know if you've met him.
We actually went to the Revere Senior Center about a month and a half ago for one of those lunches, and we walked around and introduced ourselves to people. I met a whole bunch of people at the Revere Senior Center. We're going to be going back again before the end of the campaign. We've also been to the Jack Satter House
Yep.
about a month ago. We went out to Kelly's Roast Beef when they had the singer out in front of Kelly's.
Yep.
And there's also the Sandcastle event that's coming up that we'll be at. So I hope to bump into you again and anybody else that you'd send my way, send my way so that I can talk to them about the campaign.
That would be terrific. And I want to say it was a pleasure to have you come here.
I was really honored to be here, Morris. Thank you for
Rick,
inviting
and I
me.
want to say thank you again, and let me wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. And Morris, thank you for your service. I know that it was a while ago when you served, but it's still important for us to recognize people
Let's see.
that
Yeah, quite a while.
Yeah.
70 plus years ago.
but it's not forgotten by people in my generation, and the service of you and the people that worked for the country.
Do you
in
have
your
any
generation.
family members that were veterans?
My dad was in the Army Reserves.
John?
Yep. So my dad was in Army Reserves. He did his basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I have a cousin who has recently retired as a colonel from the United States Army.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take the last minute if it's
Sure,
okay with
absolutely,
you, Greg.
yeah.
I want to say to the people of Revere, it was an honor to have Mr. Greg Henning here. Let me wish you the best of luck, Greg, and God bless you on your endeavors.
Thank you. And if
I
I
wanted
can just
to-
remind people, September 4th is the date of the election. I want to make sure people know that one.
Right.
Yep.
Make sure you get out and vote September the 4th, folks. And I want to say thank you to all our troops serving here and abroad. God bless our great country, our people of Revere, and thank you again for coming on the
Morris,
Revere TV.
thank you very much. Thank you.